Good morning, everyone. So today back to coding, and if you missed it, yesterday I did do a code breakdown. It's about a 2-hour bit where I broke down the code, talked about different segments of how I organized the code and some logic in why I did things the direction I did. So you should be all set. If you want to watch that one back, you can get a good orientation of where the code's at and how it all sits out. And as for today, I'm coding in, and we're in the process of converting functions. I have a series of functions that are related to different tasks, different segments of the code. For example, all for buildings, all for communities, all for things. And each one of these, I'm rolling them into classes. Okay, so continue in that area. Before, when I wrote the code, I was actually using store procedures, and so now what I'm doing is I'm actually bringing them into the PHP part of the code. This will make it easier for updates, inline updates and stuff, without having to retest the database and check if anybody's changed anything there and stuff. So, okay, so the one I'm currently working on is copy building. Basically what happens is if when you're in the CMS app, the 3D CMS app, you can take a copy of your building with just one click. What it does is it creates a new building, and then it copies all of the objects that were related to that building over to the new one with new key indexes. So in this particular case, I'm in the middle of, I first copied the building, I brought over some key values that we're using, and next I'm starting to go through right now the action zones. Okay, whenever I have the code here, have section off that. I also use something else for the user IDs, and we got the table prefix. And as you watch me code, you'll notice that I do a lot of copy and paste because I just want to avoid any typos or anything. Okay, so bringing over the table prefix. The other thing is, do I need to worry about the user ID? Oh yes, of course, we're bringing over the user ID. It's planting it in there. Let me grab my variable for the user ID. And what happens is on each one of the objects, I actually write who put it there and who updated it last, and if it's been deleted, I automatically grab that piece too. So this is going to be this is the copy building ID. Okay, we have that there. And it's only grabbing the items that are shown. It's not showing any deleted items. So if you made past edits on your site, on your server or your building, it wouldn't copy the ones that are from an old copy. Okay, so next we're going to let's see, after the next we're going to do, so first I did the action zones, now I'm going to do the connecting grids. I'll grab those. There's one more part I think I have to fix on the last one. And good rule of thumb for any programmer is the better off you line up your code, the easier it is for your eyes to follow and find things when you need to adjust stuff. So you're going to find out that I spend a lot of time making sure it's formatted good so everybody can follow along what's going on. I'm trying to throw some notes in the columns as I go. That should help if you ever have to jump in and want to follow what it's doing and see everything. Some of this part becomes self-evident, like at the top of this block right here. Basically, we have, okay, this one, what I should state up at the top. Okay, first of all, right here, we're checking, does user have access to copy and new building? Okay, we check the access before it does it, because if they don't, it won't do anything for them. The next thing is we're reading in values of copy building. Now, typo. Okay, and then here, updating, let's call it update. Okay, first of all, up here, another note is new building has to already exist before this function can work. See, doing the function above it is actually over here. We're saving a building, and that does do the insert. So we created the building already. Then the next thing we're doing is copying all the objects that are part of that building. So we're updating the values as part of it, and then here, update values of the building, and starting here, update the action zones. Next one's going to be update the connecting grids. Okay, so we're doing the connecting grids right now, and just like I said, I like to copy and paste, avoids errors. So we're going to put that there. And we also changed the name of the variable that we use here. Many times in the SQL, you're going to find I used core of the variable name, but I changed the character in the front or something to signify what it's doing. Okay, so we have zBuilding ID. Another thing that I do in the code, I'm going to point it out here for you, is that when I create an insert from something, I actually tell it, I use the identifier, the index, and then I use the past index from where I copied it. This allows two things. First thing, I can actually backtrack if there's ever been a mistake in coding. I can look and see which one this was copied from to make sure I've got at least the ground zero of where everything came from. The other part is whenever somebody copies something, you get credit for how many buildings you create, if you've shared something, if you use something that's been shared by somebody else. And this past connecting grid allows me to track which building it came from when they've been shared. So that allows you to gain points as a developer, and also grow your status in WalkTheWeb, showing that you're an experienced user. Okay, so that got us the connecting grids. And next, we're going with okay, after connecting grids comes, wait a minute, did I only do half a statement? Insert into connecting grids those. Oh, there's two different levels of connecting grids. There's the ones that are the children, and then there's the ones that are the parents that we had to recreate. So I used two separate statements to get them both over here. In this particular one, we're talking the parent. I can point it out in the code here. Okay, so here we have the parent web ID. This allows us to, this is the default object. So when I create a building, there's a parent web ID where the building itself is not parented to anything else. It's just, that is the item when it stands alone. Then you have the children items, which are things that are within this building, and they automatically have, well, when you do that, you have, okay, Let's see if I can get that straight. The children items would be stuff like the things in the building. For example, if you've got a table or chairs or TV or anything like this that you've added into the building that weren't built directly as a building object. Okay, so this that's the parent, and to show everybody that it's not the same thing. Children connecting grids and parent connecting grids. Okay, let's grab this ID while we're here. Put it here. So the create user ID never changes after the object's been created, obviously, and the update user ID changes anytime somebody's updated something, which comes in handy if you have multiple people working on your project. You're able to track down who created or changed something last. Also helps in statistics. When I want to find out how much of a building you've created, for example, let's say I'm creating a resume for you in WalkTheWeb, and I want to show how much of WalkTheWeb's buildings and stuff that you've created, I can generate, just from the database alone, I can generate a list showing all the different things you've created, and then I can show what percentage of each one of them you worked with. So great helpful tool for generating a resume for a developer or graphics artist or architect. Just, those three terms. Developer, obviously you people know yourselves, but when it comes to architect, what I'm talking about is somebody that is efficient in using the program and creates different items within it. Okay. There's something else I noticed, but I'm going to come back to it. But so basically, if you build a lot of buildings and you get a lot of credit for building them using the tools within it, that can be Blender objects that you've imported, but also anything you've created from scratch actually not just from scratch, but things you've updated for other people. All those different items get counted, and we do stats on them. So I can pull somebody's resume and basically say, you've worked on XYZ, you were 90% on this particular creation, you are 100% responsible for this item, here's a list of all your communities, buildings, and things that you've created, and basically you can hand that link out, show people the web page, and say, here, you want to hire me for building something for you, here's stuff I've done in the past. Yes, I'm working on being able to create jobs for you where you sit at home and build. Okay, that one. Oh, then that's update automations. I'm on the fence about automations because what automations are is a way to sequence different events. So if you're, for example, I had, in one of my sample test programs, I actually created a Ferris wheel of sorts. And what would happen is each one of the arms of the Ferris wheel would stop on different floors of the building. So you can actually stop there, opens the doors, you can get on or off this car, and it's big enough to walk into. And it would then close the doors, go to the next floor, then stop, open the doors, let you on or off, close the doors, move to the next floor. Well, see, that was an automated sequence where I would tell it the order of which to do things. I would tell it the stopping points of where they need to stop. I set the timing. I would set the speeds. Everything else is part of the automation. So by doing the automations that way, I'm able to step out sequences and kind of build some pretty cool stuff. And that goes beyond animation because you're talking about the timing of turning off and on different animations. So it's a level higher. And then with these automations, we also have the automation steps. So for every automation, you can have multiple steps. So I created an automation, for example, for that Ferris wheel, a single arm and cars movement. Then I come back in there and I tell it in steps what I want it to do. Here's the first animation that it needs to do on start. And then the next automation would be, for a certain amount of time, when the rotation hits a certain point, I know that I'm on the floor, that I'm going to stop on a certain floor of my building. Then I had it stop. I made it open the doors next. I had it stop for a certain period of time. I had it open the doors in the sequence. Then I made it go to the next, open the doors. Let me pause for a second. Open the doors. People walk in or out. It closes the doors as another step in the automation. And then it resumes the rotation till it hits the next floor. Now I had a 3-story building, so that was 3 floors it stopped on. And then it went the rest of the distance up and around the outside edge of the building. Some of my old banner ads still show a picture of this thing. Kind of looked like a 4-legged octopus. Okay, we're getting this in place here. Okay, I have a lot of inner joins there. Let me make sure I get... Oh, that's right. We have to do the table prefix part on the select statements too. That would help. From automations right there. Make sure I get this one up here. From connecting grids. From action zones. Actually, the first one. Yes. Okay. Movement down here. Make sure I get the last of that. There's one more part I'm going to come back to and hit on each one of these, but I'll get that in just a minute. So table prefix, watch those. And hey, wait a minute, the automation, I did not update it. I'll come back to that. Oh wait, automation ID should be that one. Okay, I'm coming back to those in a minute. See how I have this? I have a function that I wrote in the original ones that says get ID 16, and that allowed me to generate on the fly the different things in SQL, the different key fields in SQL. In this particular case, I'm generating them in advance, and I'm also not using a stored procedure, so I'll pull those out of there, and I'll go ahead and create the keys up front. Okay, automation steps. Go here. Okay, and this one after automation steps. Next we're doing building molds. This is the core of the building. This is what you actually see. These are all the items that make up the actual building, all the blocks. They can be blocks, they can be Blender files that are saved are exported as Babylon objects. I'll get into more of doing that at a later date. When I'm coding, I'll show you how that process all works, where you can find the extensions for downloading and creating those different things. Okay, we have the table here. Okay, from automations, we need to get that one. We need to get join there on that. Left join, select, oops. Got a select statement here from automations, from action zones on that. Okay, some of these just narrow down how much I'm selecting from. It's easier than trying to select from everything. Sometimes things get slow if you try to do... It's just trying to make the SQL as efficient as it can. So this one we're going to update building molds. And molds is my synonym to meshes. So the reason I did that is because when I search my code, I want to be able to find things in my code and not necessarily find everything in Babylon each time also. And since Babylon is nested into my code, it's a clear way to see if it's a function I built or if it's a function that Babylon built. If I had said, mesh on a lot of things, then it would be really hard to separate when I just do a search and find and stuff. So I use molds for meshes, and I use coverings for materials. Now, using coverings for materials has another purpose, and it's because I'm wrapping the material in a way that I'm using it, and there's times when I want to do highlighting and changes to just in the interface so that you can see what you're actually working with. And what I don't want is to modify the original materials and stuff that are coming in that I'm using. So I create a wrapper called I name them as a covering, and then use the covering to host the materials and be able to set things within the covering. So another reason, like I said, was just because when I search the code and do finds, replaces, and things like that, I want to be able to section off and find specific pieces of my code, not necessarily sort through all of the Babylon code at the same time. Okay, we've got user ID here and user ID here. Okay, so those are the values that's going to pull in there and set in there. Next one after those is, I know I can type this from scratch sometimes faster than scrolling up, but less errors when you copy and paste. And continuity and formatting is one of the most important things when you're a developer, just so that you don't have to worry about it makes it easier for your eyes to travel across the page and find what you're looking for. Okay, in this case, web images, this has to do with when you create certain objects in the code. For example, if I create a button link with an image on it, this is where it stores the images. Identifies it. It doesn't store them here. It identifies which images are used on which places or faces on molds or everything of that nature. This is where it kind of links the tables. So I can have a one-to-many relationship from one upload can be used in many different parts. So this is that one-to-many relationship for the identifying which images are used on which molds. Okay, so these are the web images. We have, we get the table prefix. Make sure we do that on every one of them. Images, select these from building molds, and also, okay, so that gets that one. Those are all cram. Let's make this one. So copy. Okay, and we have that there. And we've got those. Next, grabbing the user ID. Make sure that we're bouncing the user ID in there. And actually putting this stuff in line in code is going to work better than the store procedure, because I had to do a certain number of things, figure out which the ID was going to be, and then insert it into those same things later on. Some of them kind of have a redundant type, not redundant, sorry, it's not circular references, but they are complex references. So when I wrote the stored procedure, I was actually doing some cleanup afterwards as I found errors and needed to fix things. Well, when it came right down to it, now with doing it this direction, I can straighten out those particular items. Okay, so we've got the next one. Let's see after that. Certain molds have actually mold points. What these are is if you're creating something that, for example, has a line, or if you're creating a tube. I used a tube in an example to create a go-kart frame. And when I did, all I had to do was map each point, tell it how to round the corners by mapping more points around the corners, and I was able to completely build a go-kart frame with one tube. And then, because I built it that way, I'm able to scale it using my app. So it fits in any scenes. Okay, select that one from building molds. Let's put that there. And this one's going to be, it's taking it from our copy. Okay, put the tags around it. And yes, I know there are ways to leave it just like this, and PHP would actually just use it. I purposely put in the ticks. It's my habit. I like to be able to see it this way because when I copy, paste, find things, it seems to be the way my eyes catch it and becomes real friendly for me using it. I know there's shortcuts on some of this stuff, and I'm probably going to get beat up by a couple of you real expert developers going, okay, look, you're doing an extra step you don't need to do. Well, in a future upgrade, you'll probably talk me into changing it, and I'll go back through and swipe some good replace things and clean it up. So for now, I'm consistent. I do it the same way every single time, which is the goal of the whole thing right now. So okay, we've got the mold points. The next one is, look in our SQL code. And the next one after mold points is, okay, cleanup. That's good. We're going to make sure we catch every one of these things. Okay, so before I do those, I don't need to do another one of those. Okay, first things first. In here, I have a number of, in every one of these, or most of them, when I insert something in, other than the original table, so when I started the action zones, I'm using this get ID 16 to create a new field, a new key value. Well, instead of doing that, what I need to do is I've got action zone ID, for example. I need to come up here and prep work for this whole thing. I'm going to come up here, make a section, we'll call that, actually, create index values. Then we have them all in one place. We can create one after another. We can, just make it real easy to work with. So I have action zone ID, and if you notice in my frame ID, I have something right here for creating my key values. So using the general function, WalkTheWeb iframe, and the function here, string type. In that function, I have 3 different string types. Number 1 is using alphanumeric. Number 2 uses alphanumeric where they're capitals also. And number 3 uses alphanumeric and certain symbols in the thing, in the values that they return. So in this case, I want an alphanumeric. I don't care. My SQL isn't set to use. It's not set to do different. Okay, my mind went blank. It's not designed to track between caps and lowercase, so I want to make sure that I'm just using the same thing the whole time. Okay, so going on from here, we've got, okay, so action zone ID instead of that get ID, we want to put this value here, so, and I'm going to paste in that. We're going to grab our next one, right down here. I used it again for connecting, okay, connecting grid ID. And we're going to that one. Grab that variable. Go down here. And connecting grid ID is going to be right here. Then the next one is going to be another connecting grid ID. This is, let me double check. Oh yes, this is a new one. Oh, we do have one thing about that. This is going to be let me think about this one for a second. What it is for each record it has a new connecting grid ID. I can't do this way. That's why. I know I did it for a reason when I started that. Okay, actually, let's take this a step differently. Instead of pulling the connecting grid ID from up here, let's put this in the code. That should give me the new value that I need. When it came to action zones, I've got to do the same thing there. Okay, so for every action zone, now you see why I'm going to have to do the cleanup. Okay, that makes more sense. I guess I did know what I was doing the first time I wrote that. Who'd have thought? Okay, so we create a new there. We create a new value every time it comes here. Okay, we have connecting grid there, so we want to, let me do it one step better here with the tags around it. We'll copy that. And then I have this here, so we're going to replace that connecting grid. Each value will get their own value this way. No, it won't. It'll still do the same thing. Huh, no wonder I did it the way I did. Gotta think about that one. Right now, we're going to backtrack a couple steps there. I'm going to leave the get ID 16 in place, and I'm going to have to do a little thinking on that one. I'm going to leave the get ID 16 in place, and we're going to add the function to the SQL, only because since it's doing it on every single record that it's returning, my other way around that would be to select, bring back the record set. Oh, yes, I do see how I can do that. Yes, I can do it from that direction. Yeah, I'll have to cycle through the record set. Okay, so let's do these differently. Let's go in here. We're going to start with, just like I did here, copy that. We're going to do the SQL first. We're going to do the SQL first, and we're actually going to cycle through the record set and then clean it up. Sometimes you need a little bit more coffee, wake up a little bit, and then remember how to reverse engineer that one. Like I said, I don't want to use the database functions or the store procedures or functions within there. I'd rather have it all be inline code. So kind of reverse engineers some of the stuff I've already done. Okay, we have this here. That's the SQL statement that I'm going to use. Now, let me close the parentheses just so I know where I'm coming back to. Okay, so what we have right here, I'm going to put the statement, and I duplicated the effort there. Okay, so now I have what I'm getting. I'm not going to select the action zone ID. We're going to skip that. Then for every record that we're returning, this is where we want to do that step. So basically Z action zone ID equals WalkTheWeb iframe get random string 16, 1. Okay, so for every record set now, I'm going to update that now and then set off the query to insert, which, as you guessed it, now means, since I'm nesting that in there, yeah, now I have to go through and put in all these values. Okay, so first thing is on the insert, we want to know where the fields are. So I'm going to take a copy of this. We're going to use the key term values. And we're going to put the values there, ending with a semicolon. Okay, now first things first. The user ID, we'll knock that off the bottom. Okay, knock that off the bottom. Change update date to now and create date to now. And the rest of these, as you're going to note, okay, so what I've done is for each one of the results, I set the action zone, and then the rest of them, I have to pull these values from here. And I need to pull them from the record set, which means each one of these get, so we'll start with a, let's see, name the variables, past action zone ID. Okay, so just to copy and paste a little bit, take that to there. Z building ID. Z building ID is already there. I don't need to read that value in. Okay, we have thing ID, attach mold ID, load zone, action zone name, since these are action zones. Going through the field, the type tells me if it's a load zone, if it's going to be opening a swinging door, opening a sliding door, if it's attached to a click event. Every one of these things have different functionality. The action zones have a position, so you can set it for, like if I was a load zone, I might set it on the center of a building and then make it go completely all the way big and around the building. I may make it in a certain area, so if you walk into that area within a building or outside a building, it triggers certain parts of the building to load, which would be the molds. Another thing is if it's the hinge functionality here has to do with if it has an axis to rotate on. So if I'm creating a rotation object, so when you walk into an area, something rotates like a swinging door, we have the rotation of the hinge, which you can rotate a hinge 180 degrees and basically it'll swing the other direction. You have the position of the hinge, okay, the move position, move start, the delta move X, move end, actually it's the move end, that's how I did it here. Merge ID, this, I'll get into that later when we talk more about action zones. Here's the swing axis, so I know which direction it's going to rotate the door when it opens. Swing direction, that has to do with left or right. I found that actually flipping the axis over actually is more effective. So if you flip that, tell it to flip the door, then it actually will basically, it'll basically just use the door 180 degrees and go the other direction. Okay, so past ID. What I'm going to do now is, okay, we need equals row, past ID. Square bracket, close that. Now I'm going to speed things along just by copy and pasting those first. Since all I did was add a z to the beginning of each one of these variables, it'll be easy to copy and paste what's coming out of the database right to the variable that I'm using. Everything has an XYZ value, as you can tell. And, oh yes, and also notice, parameters, I cut off my S on that one. Okay, so, and also each one of these action zones, when you walk inside the zone, you can fire off a custom JavaScript function and set the parameters as an array of values. So you can have both those things being sent into, and have your own custom functions go off when somebody walks into an action zone. So that'll help for coding later. Next thing, past action zone ID, that's what I already did. Okay, so what part of what community it's in, if it's in a community, attach mold. Load level. Load level is actually being outdated. I won't need it. Load action zone ID, on the other hand, is the zone that this particular zone gets loaded. So I've actually daisy chained. When you first walk up on a connecting grid and you start loading the actual building or objects that you're going to load, one of the options you can do is you can delay the loading of load zones. So when you first get it, maybe there's only one load zone, and if you're nowhere near it, I don't need any more information about that object or that building. So basically it minimizes the footprint of a building that's in the distance. Then as you get closer, you can actually daisy chain. So when you walk inside the far action zone, or load zone, which is an action zone, when you walk inside of it and it tells you that it triggers loading the objects, it not only can load different molds and meshes, but it can also load additional action zones. So it knows that to set up the area for smaller action zones and more details as you walk closer. So another thing, and it's just another effort to maximize or minimize the footprint of memory that it needs in the browser while showing you the most detail as you get closer to things. Okay, just going through these, getting there. Position Y. Good news is these are all in the right order. Start X, start Y. End X, move end Y. As I'm going through this stuff, the other thing I'm trying to do in my mind and also put down on paper is that I'm working really hard to separate the core from different items that I tested that could come in as plugins and enhancing features, or only if you need it. So I'm really working hard right now with the copy that I started from is to strip it down to the core functionality that is needed, and at the same time, if things would make good plugins, I'm copying the references for the code back over to a plugin directory for each one of them, so that I already have like some core plugins ready to go, and I can make sure that their functionality of how plugins work, I can use them as examples of how plugins work and load them up. So, okay, so got all the way through those. The next thing is, with these different values, I'm going to copy and paste this down here because it's going to be a little easier to work from this list than this other list. We're going to put that right here for a second. And I'm working backwards. So these parameters, I need and So I don't have to do this on every single value. We're gonna indent everything, get it to where it needs to be. Okay, so, and as I'm doing this, let's see, we've got JavaScript. Now we have okay, I'm going to do this quick, easy way. Slide distance is a number, not a... Oh, well, that would help. Okay, JavaScript parameters needs a tick. That one needs a tick. That one needs it. Make sure I'm using that as default. Rotation speed is a number. Swing directions a number. Swing degrees. Swing axis is a variable. Is a string value. Mold identifiers are string values. Mold MLZ, start, rotation, hinge, XYZ are positions. Rotation, scalings, XYZ. Movement type. This is where I identified what type it's going to do. For example, if it's a load zone. Or movement type would be, it'd be a slider versus a swinging door, for example. The shape, we can use different mesh shapes or mold shapes to create a zone. So if you want one that basically runs if you want a sphere instead of a rectangle or cube, you can do a sphere. You can do pretty much any shape you want to do that you want to define. It basically looks at what shape you picked. As long as it's one of the shapes that we have defined in the app, then it'll be able to do the code. It'll be able to do it. So we're going to do that. I did delete one along the way, but okay, so then we have, I'm going to do this on the front end of each one of those. And I'm just getting all the string values in place first. Slide distance isn't. Okay, so string values there. And now these will just be that. Okay, these are the number values. And since they're coming from the database, it would pretty much have to be a number. In certain functions, like when I tell it to store in the database, when I save values to begin with, I'm always checking to see if the value is a number, and if it is, I give it a default value. So all of my numbers actually have 0 as like a rotation would automatically be 0. I'm not writing null into the database and then trying to correct it on the outside as it comes out. I do overkill, so there's a good chance that I'm checking the value when it comes in to make sure that it has a value when I read it from the database. But at the same time, if I wrote it to the database, I know it has a number value. I'm avoiding null values. Just faster, one less step in the code. So checking it going in, I always write actual numbers. And well, there are certain things, but most values I do have a written value. Okay. And I'm getting all these things in place. And here we have almost there. And just think, this is not the largest table we're going to be doing this to here today. So yes, hold on, get your coffee going and work our way through today. This is the needed stuff that just has to be done to make everything work. Oops. Okay, the good part about it is, see how it highlights everything when I get it all right. Okay, so I have the JavaScript function, parent, then slide swing degrees. I want to check those merge mold IDs. So all the way up to there. Then we have the merge mold, so those are all clear. We have the move in, move start, move position. Move in, move it, start, move position. Okay, then hinge rotate, or hinge position. What? Those are backwards. Let me check what's going on here. No, I'm sorry, hinge rotation is right there. Then hinge position would be these. Okay, I am getting that straight. And then through there, we're still good. Movement type is right there. Action zone shape type, name, zone ID, load level. Like I said, we're going to phase out. Attach mold ID. Actually, I'm committed to that. We don't need the load level. Let's get the load level. Let's drop it completely out of there anyway. And let's not put it on the insert side. Load level, when I first created the code, one of the things I did, instead of having I called the load levels by number, sequencing. So the farthest away would be 1, then going closer would be 2, then finally 3 for more detail, etc., as you get closer to objects. Well, as I grew, I realized it's not from the center of the building in just different sizes, it's randomly placed anywhere, and there wasn't that real correlation of less to more anymore. So I got rid of load level as a number, and I started using just the action zone ID based on its placement, and then I do calculations in the code to how close you are and different things like that to be able to load them up. Like I said, I nested the load zones so that they could load one after another within each other, so that helped out on a lot of those pieces too. So now we have attach mold ID, which is, I can talk about that one later on, but that's a way that we can nest objects within objects. Thing ID, you can put a thing within a building and have it part of an action zone. So like I built a thing, was the actual car for the Ferris wheel, and then because it had to be on a moving arm, not only on a moving arm, but it had to, as the arm rotated the arm this way, it would, just by nesting it onto the arm, it tried to flip the car upside down. So then I had to have a second action zone that rotated the opposite direction to counteract the movement of the first one. So what I end up doing is I end up nesting the action zones so that one action zone's moving this, but then the second one is telling it to move this mold but counteract the rotation. So we'll get into more of that advanced features later on as I'm dealing with the action zones directly. So we have thing in the mold, attach mold ID, we have building ID. This is the whole reason I just walked myself through this, to make sure I put this one back in the right place. What we have is after community, we need the building ID. That's why I walked myself through the code, to make sure I didn't miss that. I also have community, past, and now action zone on top, so I can get rid of those 2 lines. And we basically have all the values all the way to there. And I'm going to just put it that way. Okay, so we have the action zones. We're loading them in. We're giving them all action zone IDs, which we're creating for each record set now. So that solves the problem of spinning through the record set. We're telling it to do for each one of those, insert the row. And we're giving it the new values that it just read from the database, from this call up here. Just to make sure I did do every piece of that. Update action zones. Okay, so result sets row, here we go. Okay, I got the table prefix in place, and the values go. Okay, so that's the first one. Yay! Connecting grids is next. These are the children connecting grids. So the first thing I need to do, once again, is set results equal to WalkTheWeb iframe query. Now I'm going to bring over the select statement part of this. And thank goodness this one's a little shorter than the last one. We're going to take it to right there. Copy that out of there. And place it here. Okay, since we already set all the values, all the variables are correct. I'm just going to set that to there. Okay, I like to do the from and where clause also so I can see where they're at. Gotta do that on the first one. Like I said, being consistent in code is the easiest way to make sure you don't make mistakes. So select statement there. From and where, bring it back to there. Okay, so from these results, the next thing we do is for each of the results as row, and for each row, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that ID key, just like I did up here. I'm just going to copy and paste that. Yeah, I know I could have typed it faster than searching for it, but like I said, habits are habits. Okay, and what I'm creating is a connecting grid ID in this case. So let's make that Z connecting grid ID. Okay, so that gives me the new value for the ID. Now we need the rest of these fields. So for the part here, okay, for the part here, what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the fields that I pulled. I don't need the create date and stuff because I'm actually just setting those to now. So those will be now anyway. Okay, coming in here. And we have the task connecting grid ID. Parent web type. So now you've seen me use a number of values for when. Okay, so this one is actually, before I go too far, the child web ID is the building ID. Okay, and okay, so you've seen me use communities, buildings, and things. Well, in the code, when I want to reference a name and I'm referring to all of those items, I tend to call it webs. So then if I say a web ID, I'm talking about what is the building ID, the community ID, or the thing ID. It's a way to generalize across all three of those type of objects. So whenever I come in the code, like for example in the connecting grids, you're going to see web ID, you're going to see parent web ID, child web ID. The reason is because I don't know which one it's going to be. It's a value, but to know what table it's going to go is going to require the web type. The web type will be community, building, or thing. Now later on we may have more web types, but right now those are the three that I'm actually working with. Okay. Okay, so let's take these, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring those in from the rows of the response. Yeah, it helps if I don't hold down shift. Okay, the first one is past web ID. And I'm going to simplify my typing skills by after I read in all these values, I'm reading in the values because there are a couple of them, for example, the names of objects, that I'm going to come back through afterwards and scrub the data to make sure that they're clear. I may even add the scrubbing over here to make sure when it's supposed to be a number, it gets a number. In case, for whatever random reason, it ends up being a null in the field. I just mentioned that a couple minutes ago that I don't like to write nulls in the fields if they're a number value, especially position, scaling, or rotation. I want to make sure that, hey, if instead of a null value, I'll put it at 000 in your building, just so you see the object exists before I would eliminate the object for missing one of them. I try my best to make things work, so when it doesn't have something, I give it default values to do something, so it will try to work to the best of its ability. And that's kind of a common thing throughout all my coding I do, is I try to make sure that no matter what the circumstances are, something's going to work. Okay, so for this one, we want to insert these values. I'm going to move that into the part here, and we're going to move that over one. And for each one of these, I'm going to be pulling the values. Okay, so those are going to be my values. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the, we're going to do the table prefix real quick so I don't forget. Okay, table prefix. Oh, I already had it in there. I forgot we did. I forgot that I didn't forget. That's pretty good. Okay, taking the user ID, since I'm inserting per record, I want to just shoot that in here. I also want to get the current date. And the rest of these are going to be directly off of these values up here. So on points, we're talking about attention, ID, rotation, scale, positioning. It's all pretty standard stuff. Every single mesh pretty much has those three, no matter what else it has. Okay, let me get the connecting grid here. The rest of these are string values, so I'm just going to set them here with the string value notation. That helps if I put it the right direction. The tick goes before it. Okay, so going through here, we've got that. Type, child ID, child type. The load action zone, unload action zone. Hunt name, I'm going to talk about that for a second. Hunt name is actually the first game I ever wrote into the app just to test how games work or try to get some attention of somebody, testing the software. I made a scavenger hunt, and when I did it, I created it so that you could actually look for different items by name in the app, and then when you found them, click on them, you'd get a score and you'd be able to track what items you found. It kind of promoted people walking around and trying to find different things so that they would spend more than 2 minutes on the site. They would actually be walking around looking for things. So I doubled, though, the hunt name. The cool part about the hunt name is it is the alt tag for objects. So in a way of trying to do, I know that a blind person isn't necessarily going to be trying to walk around in my scenes. Okay, but in the future, I would love for them to be able to. So forward thinking, just like when they move their mouse over a web page and you have the alt tags and title tags identified so that it brings up the little words, well, the page readers actually see those and say them as they hit them on the screen. So my idea was make sure that the hunt name is the actual alt tag. What it's actually doing is as you move your mouse over the screen, it will tell you what it's got on the screen. It's identified it. Now hunt points, if it doesn't have that, it's not part of the scavenger hunt game, so that's kind of the trigger to turn it from an alt tag to the hunt. But I'll kind of clean that up so that it becomes a separate plugin at some point here. It might be the default plugin you get just for having the program. Like I said, it's kind of a cool thing because it does encourage people to walk around the whole scene and try to find the different objects. So conceptually, works great, and I think I would have been more successful if I had been farther down the road in making the program run efficient before I went that route. So, live, learn, keep on trying, keep on plugging, keep on adding things, keep on making it more efficient, and eventually everybody will come, right? That's why I'm here. Okay, we have the parent web ID. I just want to make sure I got all these names correct. It's a lot easier to track down now than it is to... See, that's one of the cool features of using Notepad++ and most of the other developing tools. When you highlight something, it shows you anywhere in the page that it's using that same item. So it makes it very convenient for bringing up stuff like that. Okay, so the next one has quite a bit of the same pattern as this one, because like I said, this one's for the children. Notice child web ID right here, which I'm bringing up. The child web ID is the child web ID. I did not bring it up into there. Parent type. Okay, so parent web type is the parent web type there. Child web ID. Okay, it's Z child web ID. Oh yeah, I did say it here. Building ID. Okay, so what it is it's telling me that use the new building as this current building. Since this is the parent, this should be one object. Could be multiple, but it is one object. Yeah, it should only be one object. It's going to be the one that has the, the building in it. So it'll create it. It'll put it in there. No problem. I'm going to think about that logic later on because the only reason it would have the building as another child is the one where it's blank as the parent web ID. There we go. It's the blank parent ID. Okay, this is only bringing back one value. I did think of that. Because the other values that would have this building as a child would be other communities where you've dropped this building. So I don't want those when I copy the building. I just want this instance that's the core parent instant. Now, for all the objects that are in the building, this is where I need it to be everything you can imagine. So this one's going to actually be all the pieces. So I'm going to copy from here through, you know what, I'm going to copy all the way down. I'm going to copy that because it's so similar. We've got the same fields. So now if I do the query is this one, because I did move a couple things in it. And get it to there. I am doing a different query. I'm grabbing different values. I'm going to compare it against the one that I've already done. So in this query, I'm going to put it right there. Okay, so get ID 16 as new connecting grid. First of all, I don't need that value because the new connecting grid has its value set from there. So I'm not actually reading in the connecting grid. So let's take that off like we did on the other statement. Glad I caught that. And here we'll take it off also. Actually, I don't even need that. So parent connecting grid, parent web ID, parent. Okay, so parent web ID, this one goes. Oh, why am I even doing that? Never mind. I'm going to use this statement, not that one, so leave it where it's at. Okay, parent web ID, parent web type, child web post, upload, hot points. Okay, so the rest of this is actually correct. We're going to format a little bit. That helps if I pull it the right direction. Okay, since I pulled the same values, that means this one becomes a little simpler. We get a new building ID. The building ID is not this one though, the child web ID. The building ID is the parent web ID. So this one is the building ID, and that goes here. I'm just swapping two values. And this one goes here, and the child web ID is exactly what it's reading in, so let's put child web ID right there. Okay, so now we have that straight. Now we're bringing in the right select statement, we're bringing in all the values, and we're doing an insert into the connecting grid, which should be all the same because we're using same notation, same part here. And we have now Z connecting grid is the new connecting grid as expected. The parent and web ID, I swapped them up there so I don't have to swap anything down here. And that takes us through that one. So sped things up a little bit. Like I said, reusable code wherever you can. Okay, next one, automations. Where did I have it doing the space there? No, I didn't. Okay. I like consistency, even in the spaces. Okay, so automations. First thing, results equal WalkTheWeb iframe. This way, query. I know my typing is not the greatest. It's what you type, not how you type it, that matters. At least I'm sticking with that story. Okay, so from here, a lot of these other fields, we've only got one more that has a whole lot of stuff in it, and that's the mold field. Everything else is going to be fairly small tables, just reference materials. So let's go through that, put that there. Select automation. We are not selecting the automation ID. We're going to pass that. So let's back out that line. Okay, we get the values. That's fine. I don't even need the part there. Okay, so we're getting the values. Next, we're going to create the loop for each results as row. We're going to wrap this part around here. I'm going to put that there. And now we need these values to make sure we get them all. With the word keyword values. Okay, now user ID is this one. There, create user ID, change this to now. The rest of these parameters should be pretty straightforward. Let's, okay, on the for each loop, let's first indent that. Right here, one more space. Okay, automation ID equals, and let me get the, let me just grab this right here. Got that value. And the other ones are going to be these values. Okay, let me do it this way. This z equals row okay, let's take this. For each one of those. Putting in the back values here. Okay, just to refresh, what I'm doing right now is I'm actually converting a couple, I'm converting some functions into classes so that they happen for every class. So converting the functions into classes allows me to, I'm just wrapping them into classes, and also I'm changing the store procedures into PHP code so that they're not calling store procedures, they're natively into the app. This will make it easier for later. Okay, we're not dealing with load levels, so I don't need load level here. It's the load action zone that matters. Let's kill that one out of there. Okay, and you know something, I think I may have, no, I didn't see it there, okay. Load levels were a thing of the past when I was first testing and trying different things. Now that I use specific IDs and I have a lot more advanced functionality with it of which ones to load and which ones not to at any one time, I don't have to use that anymore. So, okay, so here we have this. We're just gonna, these, name, community ID, building ID, thing ID, load zone, function, these are all text fields. One of the reasons that I do the notation this way instead of just having the just the default that use the quotes around it, double quotes around it, is because a lot of the time while I'm working on things I'll realize, hey, I need to use a function there, so I tend to just all of a sudden jump over the code, copy paste, and drop the function in its place, and calling the function doesn't, I don't think it does. I've never been successful at doing that. So this way I've got it in a notation that I'm just commonly using. Okay, so got that one, and now that's the automations. Now we move on to automation steps. That brings in all those values. Yes, we're good to go on that one. Okay, that was a smaller one. Here's another one that's going to be a little smaller than some of the others. So I'm going to wrap this one, make it call the results equal this. And get these sequels, the select statement. And we're going to place that here. Okay, like I said, I like to completely select out from where the major parts of the SQL statement, just makes it easy to see. Taking this part out of the actual SQL statement because I was using a function before, and now I'm calling it, I'm going to call it on the return. Okay, so from here we want to for each loop results as row. And for the insert, here's the fields I need. Now it helps if I take put that in there too. Now let me indent everything, just one more step. Now I want all these fields and values, and from that did I put that semicolon at the end of every statement? Let's see, and I didn't. Yeah. especially when it's going to run multiple statements. But in this case, it's only running one statement, so it can still execute, but it's consistency. Okay, so that was the first one anyway. So we're down here with this one. Okay, first part, we want to make sure we get the, I got the table names. Let's get the user ID. And user ID here. Date, now. Okay, for each parameter, I need condition value, condition separator, operator, okay. I think these are all, step might be a number, I gotta check that. Okay, so I'll put them all this way first, and then I'll double check in the database. I want to make sure that we get that labeled correctly. I don't want to put it down as a string when it's expecting a number. Okay, so the first thing would be, let's check the database. Let's see, automation steps, alter table. Okay, so we have okay, the only one is the step and condition value. Those are both numbers. Okay, step condition value. Step is right here. And the condition value. Okay, I'm guessing, if I remember correctly, condition value had to do with, let's say I'm performing an automation that rotates at a certain degrees or a certain amount of time. Condition value would be the thing it's comparing against to know when to stop or end that condition. So we can run condition statements. We can basically say, hey, when this equals this or is greater than this, then stop, for example. And you can tell it what JavaScript to run when it hits that condition. So that kind of helps you stage and step through one JavaScript after another based on your automation. So you're automating what happens when and how. Usually it has to do with animations that are on the screen. Okay, so that gets us through the automation steps. The next one, building molds. This is the big one. Okay. And so we'll start by taking that. Building molds is the longest table. The molds tables are. They're the most fields. I think as I go through this stuff, though, I think we're going to be able to eliminate a couple of the fields that we don't necessarily need all the time. Okay, as you can see, I do a lot in here. I think these fields are pretty much belong here for the most part. Well, we'll see. So far they do. So, yeah. So it's just a large table. It does happen to be as big and long as we think it's going to be. What it is it's all the values that can be done. Now, if I was just taking a cube, putting it on the screen and picking a color, then that basically doesn't take a whole lot of fields, as you can see. But when you come through here and you're trying to make it global so that you're extending as much as of the Babylon functionality as you can back to the end user, then you tend to need all the fields. And if you look, the meshes have a lot of properties. So in return, these tend to have a lot of properties here where you're getting those same fields. Okay, so we have all this going through. Okay, we got the insert statement. Let me do the for each loop. For each results as row, we're going to put all of this stuff in there. And I'm just going to move over the column one. That's why I'm kind of going through here like this. But I do things like, for example, when you color mold, I give you the diffuse color, the specular color, and the emissive color. So I'm giving you all the possible values. I'm passing it on to it. So obviously you have an RGB for each one of those. So the next thing is all of these values that I'm returning. The first thing I'm going to do is grab them from here because these are the names that I'm pulling from the database. Now, first things first, before I do that, just because consistency, well, let me grab them all in here. Okay, all the way to there are going to be the things that I have to define. I'll just drop them in here for a second. The next one is I'm going to take the building mold ID, and I need to create a new value for it. And I've got that right up here. Okay, so building mold ID equals this. Everything else here are going to be new values that I bring in. That's not that. Like I said, this table is one of the the longest. It's one of the 3 longest tables. They all have the same amount of values, that's why. Okay, so I want to do that on each one of these. Past. Okay, building mold ID, obviously we already got that value. Load level, we're going to eliminate that. We don't need to pull that value up here either. So let's get rid of load level. Okay. Just doing some cleanup as I go. Working on making this the very, very bold minimum of what the core needs to have to be the distributable, the open source version of the core. Then everything else can be open source projects for different plugins after that. And at some point you're going to have to recognize I'm going to go open source when I get a certain number of users following me, because if nobody's following me, nobody's even going to know the open source is there. So those are correlated. So please, if you come in here, follow me and chime in every once in a while. Visit, say hi, chime in on the chat. I appreciate every one of you that come and visit, and thank you for being here. Still moving right along. I'm not planning on leaving yet, so just trying to remember periodically to thank everybody for tuning in. Okay, we have that. And as you can see, there are a lot of values here. Oh, I really should have done this another way, but that's all fine. It's all fine. Yes, I could have used a search and replace, and that would have been wise to do a certain step of this, and instead of every single field on something that has a field list of 100 values or whatever this number is. Guess live and learn. By the time I get over to the files for copying a community where it has all this same stuff, then I'll be definitely a pro at shortcuts. Some days I catch myself just clicking through these items. The thing is, repetitive tasks like this do make it easy to talk during them, because your brain can handle two things at once. Just like chewing gum, it's a repetitive task. Thanks for the thumbs up. Okay, we're almost there at the bottom of the record set. And of course, this isn't even finishing it out. This is just getting to the bottom of the record set to go back to the top and do it again with the ending stuff. Okay, we're getting close. About 10 more values. Okay, let's go back to the top. Let's go with this. Aspis mold equals row. This. And let's put molds out. It's easier to double click a word that's there, so that's the reason I'm doing that. Now, as I mentioned, it's where I should be doing a search and replace. So if I go find, and I do replace, and I set that there. Yes, use the tools that are available to me. This is definitely faster than what I was just doing. He can be taught. Okay, that's the last one there. And then going back up. Copy that, drop it here. Copy that. And I'm copying them without the Z, because the field name didn't include the Z. I'm giving myself more time by creating these things with Z, but I do a Z value like this. I put a Z in front of the variables because, I don't know, it's my kind of personalization notation, but what it does is there's values that come from a database. Sometimes the names aren't friendly with core names used in different programming languages. So a long time ago, I got used to doing certain values at the beginning. I would do Z coming out of a database. I would do T if it's a text field coming off of a form. But these notations have kind of served me pretty good because I rarely run into where I'm using a keyword as a naming standard because of these extra letters here and there. I still have to worry about it when I'm doing direct database work, but overall, it saves me from making clashing variable names. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, is pickable. Notice some of these values is pickable, for example. You can have something, for example, the sky that isn't pickable, so nobody can click on it. And at the same time, you can have something like a box where you want the user to be able to click on it. Now, when you're in admin mode, all meshes and molds become pickable. But what I've deciphered between is that when it's in browse mode opposed to admin mode, that's what the is pickable part that I'm setting actually comes in. So obviously, one of the concerns are when you're running in admin mode, you do need a stronger computer, you need a little bit more memory. It's because I'm turning on like everything is pickable. Well, when you optimize a scene in your, when it's just browsable, you can set objects as, what's the word? Frozen. So you can freeze them in the scene. And what happens is all the frozen objects do not have to be recalculated per CPU or per render cycle. That way, it happens a lot faster. It skips a whole step in the render cycle of trying to calculate the location of a particular object within the thing. Now, when you're in admin mode though, one of the things is that you need to be able to click on things and move them quite often. If I've experimented with, as you select an object and you want to move it, that now it unfreezes the matrix so that you can move that object and then freeze it when you're done, which does render faster. The only thing is, I haven't perfected it, so sometimes they move, sometimes they freeze when you click them. As I check through the code, and one day I'll just troubleshoot that and fix it, and then I'll be able to do it. And that should be one of the core pieces that I can do to help speed things up all the time. Whenever I think of things like that, I have a little text field to-do list on my desktop, and I can I can make a little notation here, and this is my jump back and do again list every once in a while whenever I think of, okay, where am I at now, or what's some of the things I need to clean up and do. Here's my to-do list. So freeze molds that are not moving. Unfreeze when edit. Now that'll be enough to remind me what I'm actually talking about there. But I have a line in the code, I just remarked it out when I work with them. So it'll be easy to step back in there, start jumping on, start doing that particular piece. You know what, I'll leave my list open right now, put it back here. I'm done with that table. Let's just come back here for now. Close that out of the way. Okay, continue on where we were. Like I said, the one thing about doing automated things like this where it's repetitive is I can talk about other things while I'm doing it. It's like chewing gum. As long as I don't bite my tongue. Second I say that, I'm going to mess up. Okay, height map. Oh, killed that one. Let's try that again. When you double click, you can get a field. If you try to click it again, then it automatically grabs the whole line. So as long as I'm smooth and doing it, most of the time I grab what it wants. The good old backup and undo features are some of the best things that are ever invented. Shout out to whoever invented undo. You're my hero. Okay, we're getting there. And let's see how far away we are. Oh, cool. Not too far. Getting through all these. Okay, going through V scale, U scale. By the way, those are some important things. V offset, U offset. What those are is when you put a material on the surface of a mesh, you get the option to resize the surface of that face. Two values, kind of a X and Z values. But what it is are, okay, V and Z, thank you. But what it is the vertical and horizontal alignment on a mesh. So if I, for example, put two meshes next to each other and they have a pattern on them, I can use the scaling and the offset to make sure that those two meshes align the graphics that are on it. So useful feature. I allow you some adjustments on that, and okay, so we're almost there. Covering, like I said, covering are my materials, but it's a way to set it. It identifies what type of covering. For example, the class of covering. Since the mesh itself can create many different types of materials to put on the mesh, my covering is what I'm saying is going to be, are you going to put a color? Are you going to put an image? Are you going to do an image that has a different orientation on every side, like all facing upward as you go around it? Useful when you're doing brickwork or something on walls. So these different, the covering is actually selecting which one of the materials classes am I going to use to put it on the thing. Because there's things like mirrors, there's things like so reflective surfaces, there's water surfaces, there's so procedural surfaces where it actually creates moving items like grass. There's all kinds of things that Babylon can do. If you want to check out, just a little shout out back to Babylon. BabylonJS.com will allow you to check out and see all the samples of stuff that they can build there. Any one of those things can be built using my code. You can also, when I'm done, you're going to be able to implement your scripts. So if you build something in native Babylon directly, you're going to be able to go in there, upload your script, and actually include it as a thing, a building, or a community in a scene. So think of this as an extension of Babylon, an extension of WebGL, an extension of Blender, where you can build something with cool animations, then just drop it in here. And this is what is going to bring it all together. And technically, it's a loader. It's a way of walking and making it load as you go and unload as you walk away. So the features and functionality of what you can create is up to Babylon and Blender. How you load it and how you walk the web is what my program does. So I'm creating that layer. And in addition to that, I'm creating a 3D CMS so that you can manage what you load and not on your server and for each website. So the same way WordPress or Drupal and other CMS programs make it easy for you to create websites, this is going to make it easy for you to create gaming scenes and shop at 3D shopping stores and make communities where you're adding more than one building together in a scene. It's going to help speed up the production and generation of games. And you're going to get the user base from WalkTheWeb when you do it. So we can share the user base between all of us and create these different scenes to visit. Okay, back to work. Okay, so insert into the fields. We have all these fields right here. Okay, copy that. Values, and paste that. Go there. Now let's start by, first of all, I got that in the table prefix. We're good there. Next thing is I want to get my user ID. Drop that into the insert statement. For the update user ID and create user ID, because it's the first time it's updated is when you create it. So then it always has a value for the last time it was updated, and if it's the original creator, then you know what you've got. It hasn't been modified, or at least it's been blessed as the latest version. Okay, update date is now. We're basically time stamping. Okay, so the rest of these, let's see if there's a fast, easy way. No, there isn't. Okay, so we start with things that I know are strings. And we have our diffuse colors, JavaScript parameters, enumerator. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. When you pass in parameters, they're enumerators, and we pass them as arrays and then turn them into enumerators, or vice versa. Okay, so allow search. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna set them all, and then I'm gonna back out ones that are obviously not string values. I think that'd be easier than trying to skip some as I go here. Okay, going through these. Minimum height. Subdivisions. Yes, I can set the quality of an item block that I put on there. For example, if I do a sphere, sometimes I want to set the subdivisions higher so that it looks like a more detailed sphere. I played around with Babylon lets you actually change the number of subdivisions as you walk towards an object. I played around with that and tested it, and it actually worked really well. So like if I see a sphere from, let's say it's across a football field, I can make it 6 or 8 subdivisions, which is very, very rudimentary. It's almost a cube at that level. And as you're walking towards it, I can up it to different levels. So by the time you walk up close to it, let's say you're half a football field away, now I'm at 12 subdivisions, which in most cases looks like a decent sphere. Then I'm getting closer and closer. Let's say I'm at 10 yards away, or really approaching it, I can jump up to 20 or 22 subdivisions on a sphere. Let's say it is something that I want so detailed, I can actually jump it up to 30, 40 subdivisions when you are standing right next to it. If we need that kind of detail, the system allows it, which is really cool. Now I'll have to set a few parameters in that, because of course my goal is to give you as much as I can, and it lets you go to the highest levels that it can handle without losing the fluid animation part. So my code's going to be a little bit of the watchdog, and it's going to be making sure that you can do the whole thing, making sure you can create something and it runs smooth. My job is making it run smooth, making it run efficient, and making sure that the framework supports what you need to do. Then when you create things, though, we'll have a handful of different stuff you can actually test and try to make sure that your code, we can make it as efficient as possible. Okay, so I'm going to do a find and replace just on the screen. I'm just trying to speed along some of the things here. Okay, so I'm going to go down the row. I know some of these are, in fact, a lot of these are numbers. So I'm going to compare it to the database because I don't want to miss any, because that causes more trouble than it's worth with database entries. So let's go on through here. And there we go. Okay, so now the ones that aren't, let's bring open our building molds table, alter. Okay, so what I'm looking for, load level, which I'm getting rid of. Oh, did I take it out of the top half? Let's lose it right. I took it out of the bottom half when I ran into that name. Let's get rid of it right here. We're getting rid of load levels because we no longer use them. Okay, starting with position XYZ, scaling and rotation, just like I thought. Special. Talk about special in just a second. Let me concentrate for a second here so I don't miss any of these. So position, I'll do the first part of this just so I can walk down it, and then I'll go clean up the second side of it. Special, offset, use scale. Okay, so that takes us down to there. Offset, use scale. Okay, the next one is graphic level. Graphic level is a cool one. Graphic level allows me to override the default value of something. Oops, what did I just do? I didn't do anything. Okay. Okay, so graphic level, it allows me to overwrite the default level of graphics that I'm loading. So in my database, I actually store multi-levels of graphics. And I'm going to make this a function of how far away you are from them also, but the idea is if I can load smaller graphics the farther away you are, and then as you're walking closer, load higher graphics in the same way that I was talking about the, what was that other piece? I know, just a couple seconds ago. Oh, the being able to do the subdivisions on a sphere, for example. I can also change the graphics that are on the face of something. So let's say it's far away. I can load a thumbnail, load it far away. It looks like the right color. It's off in the distance. The little bit of blur won't happen because the object is drawn small on the screen based to the size of the real object. So it really isn't an issue until you get close enough that the blur, the object is actually bigger on the screen than the size of the thumbnail image itself. So as long as we're paying attention to that as the snap over point, we can actually make it dynamic where something farther than that uses the thumbnail. As you get closer, it goes to another size graphic. Then as you go closer yet, it goes to another size graphic until you are standing right next to it, and we could be looking at 4K graphics at some point in time. I'm not promising them yet. I'm saying that we're heading for it, and we're going to be able to do it when it happens. When we're ready, when everything else is fine-tuned and we get past high-definition graphics, then we're going to switch it over and we're going to be able to do 4K graphics. I'm planning for it the whole time. I'm making it efficient so that it's always an option in what we're doing. Okay, so back to what I was doing. I'm just checking for the different fields. The colors are all, they're all numbers. Okay, so let's go through the diffuse color. I had those at the bottom of the list here. Okay, so we have diffuse color. Okay, going through these ones. Okay, going there. And then we have, after that, the next one is sound loop. Many times I set different things. Instead of using a binary field in the database, I tend to use integers. The reason is I've had too many times in code, for example, delete. I say, is this item deleted or not? Well, after the first couple times of doing it, yes, deleted, yes or no, I found out that there's times when my system deletes something opposed to the user deleting something. So what I wanted to do was being able to designate between a system function and something that happens by a user action. And so I started using 0 means it's not deleted in this case, 1 means it's been deleted by the user, and 2 means that the system deleted it. Now there's other times where, let's say I delete a building and it has a bunch of building molds in it. To make it easy to recover in the code, what I do is I check for the highest value in the delete value being used above 2, since I know that's my system value. And what I'll do is I'll use that integer as the subset of which things are being deleted. So if the building gets a number 5, for example, let's say that's the next highest available, or the next lowest available number, then I set it for the building when it gets deleted, but then for every building mold, every action zone, you see what I'm doing here. Each one of these core areas, the connecting grids that are related to that building, the automations, the automation steps, the web images identification, the different mold points, every one of these objects and tables, I put that deleted object 5 as the number that it's a delete set that I'm using. What happens is, if you go, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to delete that, or if somebody contacts me as a webmaster of whatever instance this is and says, boy, so-and-so screwed up, they deleted this because they had access to it and didn't know what they were doing, you can go back in manually and change the 5 to a 0, and it's not deleted, it's right back on the site. So simple search, simple thing. We can even have some functions that return things at that level where you can pick the delete set and some admin tools later on. But for now, just to know that they are separated out in a way that we can relocate them as a group and restore full big areas of stuff. Like a community or a building or a thing with everything else as a sub part of it. Okay, so, oops, helps if I don't put the words off the edge of the page. I'm just moving this over next to me so that I can still see it while I'm going. So sound loop was one, sound max distance. Okay, this is when the sound shuts off. So like when you're playing a sound, it actually is very cool. It's 3D sound. So as we're doing this stuff, we actually have the ability to create cone effects of areas where the sound projects to. As you walk away, the attenuation, you can actually, in Babylon, you can actually set your own formulas of how you want the sound to diminish as you walk farther away. It is stereo sound, so it will, as you're turning one way or the other, it'll play into one stereo speaker over the other. Really cool features. They've added that not too long ago, and as soon as they did, boy, I took advantage of that. Security levels, this is something related to blogs. I'll get back into that stuff when I'm building the blogging plugin. I'll probably be pulling that from an object later and giving it some type of ID going the other direction instead of from here. So we'll see. I've got some planning to do on that. But security level had to do with what you can view and what you can't. So security level is a number. Then the next one is opacity. Opacity, yes, you can make ghosted images. You can even make invisible images and have them part of the scene. Like, let's say you had something where somebody can walk. Let's say I built a museum. I put a little velvet rope there. I don't want somebody to be able to walk through that velvet rope. I can actually put a transparent wall right there. Nobody can walk anywhere that I don't want them to. Let's say you're building a game and there's an out-of-bounds area where you just don't want them to walk. You could put an invisible wall as easy as putting up a box, sizing it to the size you need it to be, setting it, the opacity to 0, and basically it's invisible. People can't see it. Billboard mode, this is a cool feature of Babylon. Billboard mode lets you create a plane, so flat plane, two-dimensional, put it someplace, and by saying that it's billboard mode, it'll always face the user looking at it. So if I create, for example, the image of a tree, like a pine tree, and I put it in the distance on a hill, it can be showing a pine tree with, transparent background so that it shows the hill behind it. But as you're moving, it'll always face you, so it looks three-dimensional, but you're not using the expense of adding a three-dimensional item just for a background image. Billboard mode is awesome. I also use it over the avatars when I want to tell you the name of the person that you're walking up on. That way the name is always facing you. Billboard mode, really cool mode. Okay, we have things like water reflection. In the code, one of the things you can do is subdivisions are that, height, collisions. One of the things you can do in the code is that you can choose what meshes or molds can be reflected in the water. And what I do in the code is when you're making that cube or that sphere or whatever you're creating, if you turn it on to be receive reflections, if there's water nearby, that water will automatically read in those meshes and add them to the array of what gets a reflection in that water. So I'm doing the Babylon coding for you basically, and letting you click one checkbox and say, show me a reflection for this one. In the same way, I do the same thing with shadows. You can either receive shadows or you can send shadows. There's some stuff. I'll be working on shadows to really perfect them at a later date. There's a lot of functionality with shadows. There's a lot of settings that we can do. When you've got, to make it work for everybody, there's some settings that are better, that are very efficient. And then when there's people with, super graphics computers, there's some settings that make it look really cool. So we'll do a balance of both. We'll make it as options. You'll be able to just click a slider and decide how high you want to set your shadows. And it'll also take in consideration your CPU, your graphics CPU, your amount of RAM, everything, all your available resources. So we can maximize and suggest which are your ideal settings just by going to the site. Okay, so is pickable, is note. Okay, the next one is hunt points. Let's go down here, hunt points. Past that we have, okay, hunt points there. Allow search. Allow search had to do with the products on the shelves. That's part of the 3D shopping package. That'll be a separate plugin by the time I'm done, so I'll strip that stuff out of here from the core. Okay, hunt points, let's see, allow search, and I'm good to go. Okay, so those are all the ones. Now I need to make sure that the tail end of each one of those aren't causing a problem. Okay, so I'm going to first take off the tick marks for the, oops. Take off the single quotes on the items that are, oops, let's not do the ones that are strings. Do the ones that are numbers. I'll search, let's get rid of that one. Okay, slow. This one. Note is pickable. Check collisions. Max height, min height. Oh, the billboard mode. Love that mode. Opacity settings. Security level. Like I said, that's part of the blog and the blogging ID stuff, so we'll keep that there. Okay, these are the sound distances, attenuation, the cone of reference, the roll-off, sound max, sound loops. As I do this stuff, I'm going to be exposing more and more for developers. I may even make a plugin that says, hey, if you're a developer, add this plugin, and it extends the functionality of your admin so that you can take it to a whole nother level of granularity. You'll be able to get into the guts of it and change scripts, whatever you need to do. We'll get there. That's not something I'm prioritizing at the moment because I've included quite a bit with the course. So let's get the core working, then we'll enhance it, right? Okay, so that takes care of that. Those are all the values that it's going to submit. And okay, so being passed. Okay, I believe I've got all those. That should handle that piece of it. Okay, before I do web images, I'm going to take a short 5-minute break, and I want to thank for any of you that are coming in, for all of you that are coming in here and viewing. I want to thank you for being here and listening. I'm going to take about a 5-minute break, and then I'll be right back on and continue the coding. So while you're taking a break, hey, quick health check. Do your 500 steps on your pedometer. Grab some more coffee, whatever your Jolt, whatever you're drinking, and I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, I'm back. A little quick break. 500 steps. Got to stay healthy. A lot of programmers. It's a lot of years of sitting. So jump up, take a quick 500 steps on your pedometers every once in a while, and stay healthy. Make you a long living programmer. Okay, so next one we're doing is the update web images. We have to start by doing the. Got to get the select statement first. Okay, now I'll go grab the select statement on the bottom half of this. Web images, like I said, I've already done the worst of them, so this one's a short little sentence compared to, or statement instead of the other one. Okay, do that there. Go up here. Wow, this fields. Once we've done the worst of them, this is easy. Okay, select statement and the from and the where clause. If I had a grouping or a order by or anything like that, I would also bring those down to the root level. I kind of like the segments showing separately because when I'm looking at code, that's the quickest, easy way to see the difference between the fields, the tables, and when I'm doing things like adding the table prefixes, which of course we missed one right here. So like I said, when we're doing these different things, it's the easiest way to double check and make sure you get them all is by putting them in the sections that they belong. Okay. It's all about the format. As a developer, the more consistent you are about where you put things and lining them up and coding the same way, same type of variables, same type of notations, the better off you get in a groove with that, the better off your apps look. Now, the real test of a true programmer is when you have to pick up and use somebody else's code. The ability to go in there and make changes that the original programmer looks at and goes, I don't remember doing that, but looks like I did. You should always be aware of the environment that you're working in, be aware of how they name things, be aware of how they use their variables, the layouts, the spacing, the formatting, the notations that they do. Every single piece of this is part of a developer's, almost their fingerprint in the code. I've had times where I've worked on stuff afterwards and I look at it and go, I can tell I did that, somebody else did that, somebody else did this, and I can see the generations of something maybe I've inherited as code to work on. Well, with when it comes to coding, the biggest thing would be is if you can make it look like you were never there, then basically you've got the touch. You're a professional programmer, because it's not so much that you're doing your style on their code, it's making it look seamless on their code and matching whatever they're doing. So there's a lot of weight, there's a lot of value in making code that resembles the original. Learn to read what they've done and adapt your style when you're coding in their playground. If you author apps from scratch, hey, by all means, be the person that everybody else is trying to copy. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and put this stuff in here. Password images, thing molds, building molds, community mold ID. Now notice this table has thing mold, building mold, and community mold ID. I could have gone with the notation of web ID and web type, and that would have been 2 fields instead of 3. It changes a little bit of logic in a couple places, but not too bad. So that's an alternative. Okay, so hunt points, we already know that one's a number. Okay, so then this one, we know these are text fields. We know that one's a text field. Image clicked, image hover ID, web image hover. When I first did some of this stuff, I do some things like web image. What it is I was using full-on paths. Then later on, I started uploading some things to database as a security measure. Like if you were to create a social network, you wouldn't want an image available on the internet unless they had access to it. So by using the database to store the images, they're not directly accessible by the web server, because when you put an image on the web server itself, they are available no matter what you do. So when you turn around and you put in a let me say some hellos. No, hello. Okay, spelled it with two H, capital H, capital E. No. Okay, so when you're blah 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 blah. Okay, so if you put a file on a web server, that image is pretty much available. You can try to block the image availability. You can set some permissions, but you're only as secure as your web server, and there's a lot of times where things get changed over time, and you could actually lose some of your ability to be secure. So what I do, though, is I give you an option of putting things in the database or in the file server when you upload files. Also, if you upload a file, I put a thumbnail of that file in the database server. So I'm kind of doing both. I'm storing them in both places, but then you can choose which one you want to use. It's another way that in the future, let's say you lost some files on the server, hey, you could actually restore them from your database. So a couple different ways that I currently do it. If you want to save space, I guess on a database, we could change some settings there where it becomes an admin option that you choose if you want to save them in the database or not. But like I said, if I was writing something like if I was writing a social network or a permissions, let's say you walk through a door in a scene, and when you walk through that door, that's when you would be able to, only certain people that had the password or were approved could get into that door. So you could have a secret community behind a door, and only certain objects load if you're part of that community. And this is where that would come in handy. You'd be able to say, hey, I'm not going to let anybody see what's behind that door unless they're part of my secret community. Now, you've protected it. And they are in the database, so there's no chance of somebody just, clicking around a server and randomly finding different images. Okay, so we got the web image ID. The next ones are, let's get the rest of these items. Okay, down to there. Just grabbing the values. Okay, so I'm going to take this much, and I'm going to make it star z equals, and we're going to go.
I just want to see if she received the email with the signature and she transferred
Okay, there we go with that. Okay, so I'm back, and let's see, we've got in the process of setting these fields, building mold ID, and I've got the community mold ID, image, web. I think community mold ID, I just had it was blank, so I've just had two things that changed right there. I better look back at the original SQL. I've got a couple fields there that I was actually bringing from a previous statement down to this one, obviously, so let me double check and make sure I'm not step. Oh, it was different table fields. So since they're coming back as table fields, okay, I'm grabbing community mold, and it doesn't matter. It'll automatically have the one it needs. Okay, so bring this in here. That. Is the image index a number? I'm almost guessing it is by the naming scheme. I'm going to double check. Oh, I know what that was. There's times when I have the ability to set certain fields, create like a slideshow. So if one block has like a slideshow of different pictures that go on the surface, then each one would have an image index, and the index basically tells it what order to show those images in the slideshow. So this is my ordering function. Let's make sure that that's the only one. Web images, let's look at the table. Image index and graphic level. I do have a graphic level happening there. I don't have all the fields coming up in this yet. Let's fix that while we're here. Okay, so I want to... Oh, wait a minute. Since I'm setting... I think I did think of this. Okay, so since I'm setting the images, I don't think I have to set the graphics level, because the graphics level is going to be the one I'm pulling at the different times. I think that's more related to the uploads folder instead of this folder. So I've already pulled that out of here as a cleanup. Yeah. Okay, so the graphics level is not going to be part of this function right here. That's part of when I pull it from the uploads. See, these are references of images. So when I say I've got a mold, I say, let's say a building mold, which is, let's say I've got a cube. And I want to put a different image on the face, and I want to have, if it hovers over or if it clicks, I want to be able to show the different images for each one. Each one of these, image click ID, image hover ID, image ID, each one of those are actually a reference to the upload ID of where that image sits. The upload ID in the uploads table also tells you the physical path on the server. So you can use the physical file if it exists, or it can use the data in the database to recreate that file. Okay. Now let me finish getting these here. Thing mold, building mold, community mold, image mold index, web image, image ID, web hover, image hover ID. I'm going to be eliminating a couple of these because I don't necessarily need to write them all in the database. For example, image, web image, and image ID. Web image is the path. Image ID is the ID in the uploads directory, and the uploads has the path. So I think I'm phasing that one out. Same thing for web image hover and image hover ID. So I've got a couple of them in here that I'll be cleaning out. I don't want to grab them out of here just yet because I'm not done using them. Once I get them completely out of the code, I'll eliminate them all at that same time. Okay, so that takes care of that one, and now we're up to update molds. Okay, so that grabs each one of them, inserts into the database. Did my select statement still have? Yes, it did. It gets 16 ID. We don't need that one. Yeah, I probably did it on the last one here too. No, actually I didn't. I'm good. Okay, let's get back down there. Almost at the bottom of the set. Next one, mold point, and that one is it. So let's do the mold points. Results equal. Grab that real quick. And we want to grab the select statement here. And we're going to notice we only have a few fields. This one won't take long. Mold points, once again, are my lines when I define some object, a mesh or what have you, that has different things. Like when I created the tube for the go-kart. The tube for the go-kart allows it to, I can tell it all the different points to pass through, and it creates a complete tube of wherever you want it to go. Works out great. Let's see, the next thing I need to do is, once I've grabbed the information from there, and I've got another inner join table here. I want to make sure I grab that one. Left join this table, pass, okay, that gets it. And the other part is to move that over that way. Okay, it's formatted good. And for each of the results as row, what I'm going to do is we're going to insert each one of these. Grab the IDs here. Copy that. We need a values, the word values. Okay, and then each one of these are a field. So we're going to I'm going to do those ones. Let me grab them from here first. Let's get my variable for my user ID. Update user ID is that. Create user ID is that. Now, position is a number. Sort order. S order stands for sort order. Path number, and then mold ID and mold point ID. So each one has a point, each one has a mold. Okay, so the mold ID is, it could be a community mold, a building mold, or a thing mold. There. Those are all numbers. In fact, just to do due diligence, we're going to go ahead and double check that. Go over to mold points, alter table, and decimals for all those points. Order, path, or okay, they're integers, we're good. Okay. So now we have, hasn't this already been made? Oh, good question. Love to see if it has. But I've got some unique ideas in here that actually work with 3D browsing, where things load as you get closer and unload as you walk away. It's a distributed system where they're covered all over the internet. If you check out a couple of the videos that I've posted in the past couple days, you'll see the difference, and you'll be able to do it. But definitely, hello, welcome, and please follow me. Please follow me, and you're welcome to join in anytime, and I'll answer your questions as we go. And on Mondays, I also do have a day. Mondays on noon, I like to do demos and do some Q&A and everything. So welcome to come back then too. Right now, I'm jumping in on coding part of it, and yeah. So welcome to join us. Okay, so back to this. What I'm doing is, for each section, right now I'm in the middle of a copy building process so that it can, when on a single click, you can bring in the whole new building. Okay, so zmold point ID, let's get this stuff in here, is equal to, and I'm going to grab that real quick. Giving it an ID value. Okay. Next, I need to read the mold points. I just need to read in those 4 values. is equals row. We're going to read them out of the database, these values. Okay. Get each one of these values from the database, and then what I'm doing is actually some molds, for example, if I create a ribbon, then you actually have 2 rows of points instead of just one, because you can have a left and right reference point to the ribbon that you're creating. So when I store them in the database, I have to say, like, path number would be 1 and 2 of the paths, and then the sort order lets you organize which point is which, and then of course XYZ position or coordinates of the points. So using that, you get the different values. Now, because a number of these different tables come from a number of different places, and I had to create on the fly different IDs, for example, these mold points, it brings up random IDs and puts them in there. But notice that we're creating that on molds, and the mold ID itself has been updated, and it's not the original mold. So when I read these in from the table, bring them in here, and then write them to the database, they are pointed, this mold point, even though it's new points, they're pointing at the old ID. So what I do is I'm actually creating mold points. Let's see, we got this here. On a lot of these tables, what I actually do is I'm taking the past web image and I store the original one in there. Then I can use the SQL commands or statements to look for the past web images that match the current web images and replace it with the new molds that are coming through. So next after that piece is we need to do a couple different statements. Okay, did I do, that's the query goes there. Why do I have, why is that? Oh, that's showing to there. It's just not, there we go. It's not nested properly. Okay, so that's for each row. Next thing I'm going to do is, if I look at the SQL statement that it was executing whenever we copied a building, next thing is I have a handful of different update statements based on cleanup of the code to make sure that it gets the latest information. So I'm going to tell it to execute each one of these statements. What I'm going to do is and let's see which ones. How many statements do I have? I've got a ton of them here, and I don't even need the data back from these. I'm just going to set a couple of them out there, and basically I'm going to do this. It's a quick statement. Update building molds, and let's see. First of all, is that one needed? Update building molds where the action zone's ID is null. Oh, that's cleanup. Okay, so when they copied over some of these statements, some of them come up null because it's a left join statement. So what I do is I'm doing a little cleanup so that it ends up being exactly the way I expect the data to be. In this particular case, I'm looking at making sure that anytime there's a null value in those, I set it to there. Okay, so null value for the action zone ID, it becomes a blank instead. Most things should have an action zone ID, but that just keeps the system from orphaning stuff. The next one, we're doing a few checks here because the next statements also do some updates, and if they have these type of situations, they won't catch them. And instead of running 2 statements or some really complex there, I rolled it into these ones. Okay, so we have same thing, building mold ID. Okay, and moving on to the next statement. I've got a handful of things I got to do to each one of these, so let's get this one. You know what, let me, since I'm doing a lot of repeated work here, let me just get the statements across and then do some copy and pasting of the values. Let's get the next one. Okay, clean up the formatting. I'm going to need a couple more of these. Okay. Some of these may be eliminated later on as I clean up as I continue to refine the code, but for now, I'm going to bring them across the way they ran from the SQL statement just to see. And I can even do some tests to see if they were actually in use and it actually had a result set or did anything. I can do those checks later on to see. Some of these now, we're getting into the more important ones where they actually do check the values and they update the index numbers that are the foreign keys on different tables to make sure everything's been updated to represent the new key values that we've inserted. So if we put that in there and this one, we're almost there. Okay. Bringing up the formatting. Yeah, consistency always helps, always helps. Okay, let's just go through the rest of these here. Okay, the action zones. Get the action zones in here. And okay, and we're going to format that over. Almost there. Okay, I think I'm almost, what have I got? 3, 4, 5. Okay, wow. I've got a lot. It's good that I have all these different statements doing their various cleanup. Later on, I'll inspect each one of them and see if we can't get them into the core statements at the first part, just to see if we can eliminate some of these. At the time I wrote it as a SQL statement, that doesn't quite give you the same options as you do when you run an inline code. So that's one of the things I'll do is double check and make sure that we can run the statements, eliminate any of these that we can right from the source. Okay. Now we have that. Now, before I do that one, let's copy a few more of these. I don't have to keep typing that up every time. So copy that there, go to here, drop that in, and fix the formatting. Okay, next statement, down to the building molds. And these things also, not only are they statements for cleanup, but they're also order dependent. There's times that I wrote things with the old ID in the past ID field within that table, and then what I do is I come back in here and I automatically change them over to the new ID after it's been set, because don't know what the new ID is going to be until it actually executes a statement. So different statements here are doing just that. Some of these fields, for example, what it is, it's fixing all the foreign keys. So like I gave it a new ID for the mold, but when I gave it a new ID for the mold, if something else has the mold nested in it, I have to fix all those. If it has a different action zone created for the building, then each one of the molds have to have the new action zone as the load zones of when they load. Or if they're attached to an action zone to be rotated or moved or part of a door image. Whenever you select what parts of the mold are part of a door, you have to actually identify each one of the parts that are going to swing with the door hinge. So when you do that, those are all foreign keys in the other field that have to be adjusted and corrected when you copy a new building. And we're down to the last one. Yay! Okay, so get that in here. And fix the formatting. Now I'm gonna do some things across all these at once. First of all, we have the building ID is the new building ID, so we're gonna change that out. Okay, for each one of these statements. Okay, and each one of these are doing, you know, matching up the field with the past field, past ID, so that we can make sure we grab the ones that are needed to be grabbed. We can automatically update them here. And this should get us to pace. Of course, global variables in this function. So what do I got? Okay, fine. Why don't I just do this more often? Okay, replace. And the last one, replace. Okay, so now that I've done that, the other part is I want to double check this whole function. I've got quite a bit of stuff here. I want to make sure that I didn't miss any of the table prefixes. So starting near the top of the copy function, table prefix on that select. Okay, on the select there, on the select statement here from, we've got it there. Going through on the insert. Okay, on the select statement, on the insert, select statement, got it, insert, got it. From the select, from the insert, got it. And I'm making sure the table prefix, so I've got the table prefix here. Okay, there's an inner join, I've got that one, where building equals this, inner join. Got the left join, there's another table prefix, left join, another table prefix. Okay, good. And coming down here, we have, there it is for the select statement, and table prefix on the insert, good. And this one here has got the select statement, got that one, left join, I got that one included. Okay, and now the insert, we've got that one there. Okay, select statement, there's the left join, okay, and the table insert, I've got it there. Okay, so now these update statements are these the only ones that I didn't catch. Okay, just good to know. And also notice okay, this one, 3D Engine, yes, that is the current table we're working with. Just want to make sure I'm not doing something I shouldn't do here. Okay, so these are called from that particular table. So we get the prefix in place from building molds here, where, that's all good. Okay. And now the next statement, that's the update. Oh, see, I didn't get the update. It's because I'm using a select statement after an update or a thing. I just want to make sure I get them all. Cool, check them out, thanks. Okay, and building molds. Okay, and that's going building that's from there. Building ID equals that. From action zones. See, this is where I got to catch each one of these froms. set that equals that, where that, okay, where building molds, update action zones, update action zone, update building mold, action zone, from the action zone. Okay, I'm almost there. Okay, we're getting there. Connecting grids, action zones. Okay, connecting grid here. Action zone. And connecting grid and back to the action zone. Okay, so I'm reading the value from the original table that I've already modified and already got the current key. And I'm basically feeding in the value, and that calls it, and we complete that function. Okay. Okay, that gets us through the copy mold, copy the building. And that was a big mouthful for today. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to, I'm going to continue on later on, but I'm going to take a short break, get some lunch, and I'll be back on again later on. If you can, go ahead and follow me so you know when I'm back on, and check it out. And hey, tell your friends, have them check it out. I'd love to see what Janice VR does, so I'll be checking that out too myself. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for visiting. Thanks for watching me code. Boring life of a coder, right? So have a great day, and like I said, follow me, and I'll be back on in a little while. Thank you.